My name is Emilia Jamroziak. I'm professor of medieval religious history at the University of Leeds, and during this academic year I am also research fellow at the Max Weber Kolleg in Erfurt. It's a Horizon 2020 founded fellowship. And here at this colloquium I presented a paper that in which I tried to explain on a relatively small selection of examples how interdisciplinarity works in my field, in medieval studies. In a sense, how interdisciplinary constructs knowledge in medieval studies, and why I think it's crucial for the field itself now, but also for the future developments. And in my presentation I used the example of relationship between or influence of anthropology on medieval studies and the benefit it brought, but also used it as an example of how interdisciplinarity works, in the sense that it is not a wholesale or not comprehensive adoption of methodology or even terminology from another field, in that case anthropology, into medieval studies, but certain selection. And I'd also try to explain how this selection works and why it's been valuable. And I also explain phenomenon of so-called material turn in medieval studies, a phenomenon that's had impact for a long time on many areas of humanities and is more recent in medieval studies, which allows a very different engagement and approach to primary sources, and primary sources that are non-textual. And really the aim, ultimately what I wanted to achieve in my paper, and I hope I have done that, was to explain how interdisciplinary help to see what is otherwise invisible if we have a single discipline approach. So interdisciplinarity allows to shift perspective. In some cases the shift on perspective comes from different methodologies, but also sometimes it can be even described as different sensitivities. For example, one of the important influences of anthropology has been sensitivity to other way of thinking, other cultures, things which are ultimately very alien to a modern researcher. And in that sense, influence of anthropology since the middle of 20th century on medieval studies allowed to reduce areas without history in medieval past. So it helped to study social groups or other types of groups that seems to previously have no history. So they were not valid subject of research. So, for example, history of disability or history of childhood are good examples of how interdisciplinarity allows to create new valid areas of research. And finally, as my final point, I would like to bring this problem of material turn, which is very closely and intimately connected with interdisciplinarity. In one way, it came into medieval studies from art history, and it means that objects, will they be works of art or other objects that survive from medieval past, are not studied just for their artistic value or even context in which they were produced or used, but their actual physicality. In part, it is connected with possibilities or technological possibilities now. DNA, but also spectroscopy. And it means that we can obtain information about substances from which they were made and that can answer specific types of questions. For example, from where came the sheep of which parchment was made? Were they local? Were they imported? For all sorts of questions about, for example, in early medieval history, about connectivity, trade, transfer and travel of both people and objects, these are very important. But of course, what is very significant and can be also problematic in the material turn is that these developments must not be simply driven by technology, but they have to be driven by research questions. Because if we, in a context, if there is plenty of money to do this kind of things, a lot of studies can be done, but that cannot be simply driven by availability of technology without serious questions behind it. There's also, in certain areas of medieval studies and medieval history, it can be also problematic. Especially contested area is study on DNA of material associated with so-called early migration. So it's following at the end of fall of Roman Empire, and this huge as historical strong belief, there was this huge migrations of people into Europe, and this can be very contested area also in terms of appropriation of medieval history by alt-right and all sorts of building ideas about what Europe is, to whom it belongs, and very, very problematic concepts. Thank you very much.